November 5th, 1396. A 6-year-old French princess, barely more than a toddler, stood before the altar in the grand Westminster Abbey, her tiny hand placed into the grasp of King Richard II of England, a man 3 decades her senior. This was not a scene of joyous union or blossoming love, but a solemn, chilling political maneuver, orchestrated with a detached precision that disregarded the profound innocence standing at its heart. The flickering candlelight cast long, distorted shadows upon the ancient stones, perhaps mirroring the unsettling reality of this grotesque ceremony, a deeply unsettling event that would irrevocably define the brevity and tragedy of her young existence. She was Princess Isabella of Valois, but for a short, bewildering period, she became Queen of England, a child made queen by circumstance and cruelty, yet never truly allowed to be a child. The solemn vows, mumbled perhaps by a proxy or perhaps incomprehensibly repeated by the bewildered child, bound her not to a husband, but to a vast, indifferent political machine, a destiny she was too young to comprehend, much less resist. Her life had never truly been her own, a truth laid bare and brutal in the cold, unyielding splendor of that autumn day. To understand why a king, a sovereign of a powerful realm, would take a 6-year-old as his bride, one must peer into the labyrinthine complexities of late medieval European diplomacy, where dynastic marriages served as the bedrock of treaties and the fragile guarantors of peace. The 100 Years' War, a brutal, protracted conflict between England and France, had ravaged both nations for generations, leaving behind a trail of devastation, economic ruin, and an insatiable hunger for stability. King Richard II, eager to extricate his kingdom from the costly and seemingly endless hostilities, sought a strategic alliance with France, a bond to be cemented by the most powerful of symbols, a royal union. The French king, Charles VI, afflicted by bouts of profound madness that rendered him incapable of consistent rule, had his kingdom managed by a regency council eager to secure respite from the English incursions. This confluence of exhausted monarchs and desperate councils created a perfect storm of political expediency, where the fragile lives of children, particularly royal offspring, became mere bargaining chips on the grand chessboard of European power. The choice of a young child ensured the longevity of the alliance, preventing its dissolution through the immediate death of an older spouse, and promising future heirs to solidify the union for decades to come, a chillingly pragmatic calculation, devoid of human warmth or concern. Isabella, born in Paris in 1387, was the second daughter of King Charles VI and Queen Isabeau of Bavaria. Her early life, though privileged in a material sense, was shadowed by the profound instability of her father's unpredictable mental illness, which often plunged the French court into chaos and paranoia. Charles VI's episodes, characterized by violent outbursts, delusions, and periods of complete catatonia, were a terrifying backdrop to Isabella's childhood, stripping her family of the emotional security and stability that even royal children might hope for. Her mother, Queen Isabeau, a politically astute but often maligned figure, navigated these treacherous waters with a pragmatism that prioritized dynastic survival and the tenuous hold on power. In an era where infant mortality was rampant even among the aristocracy, Isabella's survival to the age of 6 was itself a testament to providence. Yet that survival merely propelled her into a more profound vulnerability. The French court, a crucible of ambition and intrigue, saw its princesses as valuable assets, commodities to be traded for political advantage, their personal desires and emotional development utterly secondary to the larger aims of the kingdom. This environment, devoid of consistent paternal guidance and steeped in political calculation, prepared her not for a normal life, but for the stark reality of her impending sacrifice. The wedding ceremony itself, on that cold November day, was less a celebration and more a solemn, ritualistic transfer of property. Isabella, dressed in the finest silks and jewels, her tiny frame weighed down by the heavy regalia of a queen, must have been a bewildering sight. Richard II, reportedly deeply devoted to his first wife, Anne of Bohemia, who had died just 2 years prior, was said to have been gentle with his child bride, even kissing her upon their initial meeting. Yet, this fleeting gesture of kindness could not erase the fundamental brutality of the situation. A 6-year-old girl, ripped from her homeland and family, was now bound to a man old enough to be her grandfather, her fate sealed by decrees she could not read, and motivations she could not comprehend. The union was swiftly consummated, not in the traditional sense, but through a legal arrangement where the child was merely presented, a legal proxy for her future, fertile self. She was henceforth Queen of England, a title of immense power, yet she possessed absolutely none of it. This was no ordinary ceremony. It was a deeply unsettling transaction, a stark reminder of how relentlessly the machinery of state could dehumanize even its most exalted members, reducing them to pawns in a larger, relentless game. Once in England, Isabella's life as queen was one of profound isolation, marked by a forced maturity that belied her tender age. She was installed in Eltham Palace, far from the tumultuous epicenter of the English court, a deliberate choice by Richard to protect her from the political intrigues swirling around him. Surrounded by a retinue of French and English ladies in waiting, she was tutored in the intricacies of courtly etiquette and prepared for a future role that might never come to pass. Her days were a tapestry of lessons, embroidered cloths, and formal observances, each moment meticulously structured, each interaction carefully monitored. She was a child, made queen but never allowed to be a child, never permitted the simple joys and unburdened play that define youthful innocence. Richard II, perhaps recognizing the profound unfairness of her situation, treated her with a curious blend of paternal affection and regal distance, occasionally visiting her and ensuring her material comfort. Yet, even his kindness could not mitigate the crushing weight of her reality. A foreign child in a foreign land, bound by an impossible contract, her very existence defined by political rather than personal bonds. The silence of her childhood, broken only by the whispers of courtly protocol, was a haunting testament to her emotional torment. But to grasp the weight of this moment, one must understand the perilous tightrope Richard II himself was walking. His reign was beset by internal dissent, powerful noble factions chafing under his autocratic rule and alleged misgovernance. The peace treaty with France, sealed by Isabella's marriage, was deeply unpopular with many English lords who profited from the ongoing conflict and viewed the French alliance as a sign of weakness. As Isabella quietly resided in Eltham, adapting with remarkable fortitude to her bizarre new life, the political storm around Richard intensified. The Lancastrian faction, led by Henry Bolingbroke, a cousin of the king, seized upon Richard's perceived tyranny and unpopular policies to stage a full-blown rebellion. The king's perceived reliance on French alliances, embodied by his child queen, fueled further resentment among his critics, who saw her as a symbol of his estrangement from his own people. In 1399, while Richard was on a military campaign in Ireland, Bolingbroke returned from exile, rallying popular support and rapidly gaining control of the kingdom. Richard, abandoned by his supporters and stripped of his power, was imprisoned, and in a devastating turn of events for Isabella, formally deposed. The Parliament decreed that his unworthy and insufficient reign was over, and the crown was offered to Henry Bolingbroke, who became Henry IV. Shortly thereafter, in February 1400, the deposed Richard II died in Pontefract Castle, almost certainly murdered by starvation. The child queen was now, at the unfathomable age of 10, a widow. This sudden, brutal transition from child queen to child widow plunged Isabella into a new realm of precariousness. Her husband's death, whether by natural causes or, more likely, by the hand of the new king, rendered her political value null, at least in the eyes of the Lancastrian regime. She was no longer a symbol of alliance, but a lingering reminder of the deposed house of Plantagenet, a potential rallying point for disgruntled loyalists. Henry IV, a pragmatist if nothing else, understood the danger she represented, and while treating her with a modicum of respect due to her royal birth, kept her under careful watch. The French court, devastated by Richard's demise and outraged by their princess's sudden, shocking widowhood, immediately demanded her return. Negotiations were protracted and fraught with tension as Henry IV attempted to extract concessions for her release, including the return of her dowry and, disturbingly, even suggested a future marriage to his own son. the future Henry V, to once again secure a dynastic link. Such a proposal, had it come to fruition, would have seen Isabella bound to the very family responsible for her first husband's downfall and death, a truly grotesque perpetuation of her suffering. The system meant to protect them had become their executioner, demonstrating the relentless and often brutal power dynamics that governed their lives. Isabella finally returned to France in 1401, a journey that symbolized not a liberation but a transfer from one gilded cage to another. The French court, while initially welcoming, quickly began to assess her renewed utility as a political pawn. Her mother, Queen Isabeau, saw in her still young daughter a valuable asset for future alliances, despite the traumatic circumstances of her first marriage. For Isabella, now 12 years old, the prospect of another arranged marriage, another forced political union, loomed large. She was offered to various European princes, each proposal a grim reminder that her identity remained inextricably linked to her perceived worth as a royal commodity. However, she reportedly resisted these attempts, perhaps scarred by her experiences in England and haunted by the specter of her first husband's fate. It was not justice, it was a warning, a chilling premonition of the life that awaited her. Eventually, at the age of 17, in 1406, she was married to her cousin, Charles, Duke of Orleans, a union of much less international significance, but one that finally offered her a semblance of domesticity and stability. This marriage, unlike her first, was one she might have entered into with more agency, though still within the confines of royal expectation. Despite her unique and profoundly tragic early life, Isabella, the child queen and widow, remains a relatively obscure figure in the grand tapestry of European history. Her story, though filled with dramatic shifts and personal devastation, is often overshadowed by the larger narratives of kings, battles, and dynastic struggles. She was, in essence, a victim of circumstance, her life dictated by forces far beyond her control or comprehension. The brevity of her first marriage, the shocking nature of her widowhood at such a tender age, and her subsequent quiet return to France all contributed to her being largely forgotten by subsequent generations. Yet, her experience serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating human cost of political ambition and the casual brutality with which royal children were treated in an age where power trumped all other considerations. We must remember that the grand narratives of history are often built upon the silent suffering and profound sacrifices of individuals, particularly the vulnerable. Isabella's life illustrates the moral inversion inherent in a system where the pursuit of power necessitates the destruction of innocence, where a child's life is deemed expendable for the sake of a fleeting peace or a strategic alliance. Isabella died in 1409, at the age of 19, giving birth to her only child, a daughter named Joan. Her passing, premature and perhaps unsurprising given the rigors of childbirth in the medieval era, brought a quiet end to a life marked by an extraordinary burden of expectation and sorrow. She was a child-made queen but never allowed to be a child. Her brief existence, bookended by a politically driven marriage and a tragic, early death, stands as a haunting testament to the fragility of innocence in the face of relentless power. Her story is not merely a footnote in a historical chronicle. It is a profound moral lesson. The suffering she endured, the forced maturity, the emotional torment of being a pawn in a game played by adults, speaks to the enduring failure of systems to protect the vulnerable. The collective memory, in its rush to document the triumphs of kings and the outcomes of wars, often overlooks the quiet sacrifices, the devastating personal toll exacted upon those who become instruments of state. Her life had never truly been her own, and in its fleeting passage, it offers a sobering, enduring insight into the relentless machinery of royalty, a profound and quiet tragedy often swallowed by the vast, indifferent currents of history.